Hello my dear friends, let's do a little modeling tutorial today. We will create the Marc Jacobs Daisy Dream perfume bottle, which I consider to be very beautiful. And I will do this with traditional modeling techniques as well as geometry nodes that are very handy for this task. And I invite you to follow me through this. The only thing you need is Blender 3.2 and a little bit of time, and then we can go through this. Please hit the like button, please subscribe to my channel in order to support me. And if you want to have the final result, you can download the model on Gumroad. If you want, you can buy me a coffee in return, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you very much for that. And now I would say, without any further ado, let's get straight into it. Alright, I would say we can start right now. I have a 3D model of the Daisy perfume in the background, just for reference. And I would like to start with the petals because I believe that's the most interesting part. So I hit Shift A and I add a plane to the scene and I rotate it by 90 degrees. And what I want to do is the first petal on the top, that is what I want to create. And so I try to match the size of it approximately. And then I go into edit mode with a tab and I insert an edge loop with Ctrl R. And I try to match the shape of this petal, and with Ctrl B you can do a bevel and just try to create a petal that looks like the one on the actual perfume. And if you are satisfied with your first little model, then take the bottom of it and extrude it down so you have a little bit more space for the actual array, which we want to create right now. The array is simply made with a circle and a few geometry nodes. So hit Shift A, add a circle to the scene and rotate it by 90 degrees on the X-axis, and then add a new geometry node. And the first thing is we need a mesh to curve node, and we need to resample the curve in order to reduce its resolution. Simply type in a count of 5 because we have 5 petals. And then we need a curve to, in order to make points out of it, we need a curve to points node and an instance on points. That's actually a very standard geometry node string. And now we need to get our mesh that we just created into our geometry nodes and connect the geometry to instance. And then you see there is already something visible. Add the rotation to the rotation and take down the scale to a better size. So if you've done that, you go into edit mode of our original mesh and you rotate it by 90 degrees until the blossom looks like it actually should. I don't want to mess around with the geometry nodes so much because I'm just going to apply them in a minute. The last node is we need to realize instances in the geometry nodes right at the end of it. And after that you can apply the geometry node because we don't need it any longer. So now you can rotate the blossom on the Y-axis so one of the petals is pointing upwards. And then we need to go into edit mode and we need to connect the bottom vertices. You can do this by right click, merge vertices at center. And if you want to have an easier way, you might as well go into the workspace settings and activate the auto merge function, and then you select two vertices, scale them down to 0, and then you have them merged as well, which is kind of a faster way to achieve it, right? Alright, that looks very good. Now go back into edit mode and select an inner edge loop. And the best way to make it circular would be to use the loop tools, and you will find them under the add-ons, and there will be the loop tools. Just search for it and activate it. And if you then hit the N for the N panel, then you can access the loop tools, and there you need the circle function, and that will give you a perfect circle out of your selected edge loop. Alright, that's all you need for that. I applied a subdivision surface with Ctrl and 3, and now we are actually done. This is our blossom and it looks quite similar to the original, so I think we are good to go and to continue. Next step is that we need 3 duplicates of it, a big one, a medium-sized one, and a small one. So simply select one of the blossoms and hit Shift D in order to duplicate it 2 times and then scale it to the right size. Alright, modeling the bottle, hit Shift A and add a cylinder into the scene, and then you place that cylinder right at the bottom of the glass bottle. And after you have done that, you go into edit mode and hit Shift and Z in order to get into the X-ray mode, and then you can select the vertices at the top of it and scale them up so you match the bulgy shape of the glass. And actually it's a very straightforward process. You can extrude the vertices with E, and you can insert new edge loops with Ctrl R, and that's actually the way you can model this glass bottle. It's a very simple shape, so this shouldn't be a very big challenge. If it is, please go on YouTube and look for some modeling tutorials. This is very basic stuff, and I believe that this perfume is also a very easy shape to model. So I apply a subdivision surface, and it's always a good idea to do an inset on the top and the bottom of it. So you select the face on the bottom and the top, and you hit I in order to do an inset. And yeah, I just refine the flow and the bulge of it until it looks very similar to the original. So if you're satisfied with your result, it's very important to add also some thickness to the glass, and you can do this with a solidify modifier. For that, you simply go into the edit mode again and you delete the faces right at the top, and after that you apply a solidify modifier. And in order to see how thick the glass has to be, you can compare the thickness of the solidify modifier in X-ray mode with your reference image, as I did right here, and I believe that this is completely okay as it is right now. Okay, don't forget to apply the solidify modifier, and the next step would be that we want to edit the glass at the bottom. First thing that I want to do is check if the face orientation is right, and you can do this with this little handle over there, and select or deselect face orientation, and if everything is blue, then you know the faces and the normals are looking into the right direction. And then you go into edit mode again, and we can now select the very bottom face in the middle of it, in the inside. I'm working on my laptop, so I can't hit Control and Numpad plus in this case, unfortunately, so it was a little bit tedious to select these faces. But if you are on the PC, you can simply hit Control Numpad plus, and then you can grow your selection. And yeah, the idea is that you select the very bottom of it so you can raise it up with G and Z. So I make it a little bit smaller and then I raise it up. And if you hit 1 on your numpad, you can compare it to your reference image, and you just have to try to apply the same thickness of the bottom of this bottle to your new created model. So in my case, I have to raise it up even more until it looks like, very good. And I also want to delete some of these edge loops because I believe that there are too many of it. So you go right click on your edge loop, and then you click dissolve edges, and then it's done. Very well, I think this is now looking very good, and I will go over to the next step, which is creating the liquid inside of the bottle. So for that, we simply need to select the inner faces of the glass and duplicate them onto a new layer. So simply select all the inner faces and hit Shift D and hit Escape after that, and make sure that you hit P and put it onto a new layer, because you would have a big mess if these meshes would stick together in one layer or in one mesh. And if you've done that, you can rename it into liquid, and you have to recalculate the normals because they will be in the wrong direction right now. And you can check this with this little face orientation checker. You see everything is red. Now simply select everything and hit Ctrl-Shift-N until the faces are in the right order. And select the edge loop on the top of it and hit F in order to fill it. Put an inset inside and place the inner water level a little bit below the outer water level, because that is it's kind of a natural effect and it looks a little bit better if it is not completely flat at the top. Very good. So now, in order to avoid nasty shading issues later, we need to make the liquid a little bit bigger than it is right now, so it is actually intersecting or overlapping into the glass. I know this is ridiculous and this is not real, but that is the way to avoid shading issues, because if it is right, you know, like the faces are directly onto each other, later it won't look good in cycles, I can promise you that. So just overlap it a little bit, like 10 or 20%, so it is like getting into the glass a bit. It will definitely make a big difference, you will see that later. So the next thing would be the modeling for the cap. That is probably the easiest thing to do. Simply add an UV sphere and match the size of the cap and add a subdivision surface to it, and you're good to go. After that, we will also need the little ring that is between the two bulgy shapes and on the neck of it, and that is also accomplished very easily with a cylinder. Simply add a cylinder into the scene and scale it until it matches the shape of the reference image. And then you will also want to introduce a few edge loops, and after that a subdivision surface modifier in order to make it look nicer. And don't forget the ring that is on top of that. For that I simply duplicate my ring and I scale it down on the Z-axis and place it on top of that. And then I will dissolve the edge loops that I just created in order to get my bulgy and round shape back. And that's actually it. Okay, I will also edit the cap a bit, because I believe there is a little bit of an inset at the bottom of it. So yeah, you can simply add an edge loop, scale it in a bit, and you will have this kind of an inset that is to be seen in a reference. Great that you made it to this point. We are now coming to the more interesting part of this video tutorial, I would say, because we are now working with geometry nodes in order to distribute these flower designs around the bottle. And we will use just a few nodes for that, and also a modifier like shrink wrap and solidify. And I believe it is kind of easily accomplished. I would say that if you would use other techniques, it would be much more complicated, or traditional techniques. But with geometry nodes, it's kind of easy. And yeah, let's just get into it. So we start with a circle, so hit Shift A and insert a circle, a mesh circle into the scene, and add in geometry nodes onto that circle. And the first node that we need is mesh to curve. And after that, we want to resample that curve in order to decrease the points that we have or decrease the resolution. So add in a resample curve node and type in a value of 6, because that is what we need. We have 6 flowers that are to be displayed on that bottle. And after that, you add in a curve 2 points node and type in the same amount. It's very important that we have the same counts on both sides. And the next node will be an instance on points. And that is actually our basic setup for that, for that task. So I took the time to rename my 3 flowers in order to better organize myself. So it's a good advice for you to do this as well. So like big flower, medium-sized flower, and small flower. And with M you can put them into a new collection and give them a proper name. So now you simply take the big flower and you drag and drop it into your geometry node setup, and then you connect geometry to instance. That is very similar to what we did earlier. Now you connect the rotation to rotation, and I simply go into the original big flower mesh and I rotate it by 90 degrees because I'm kind of lazy, and that should correct the orientation of the flowers right away. And I will do the same with the other two flowers. Alright, scale it down a little bit to a proper size. It doesn't have to be perfect right now, but just kind of right. Add in a vector math node and place it in the rotation connection. Leave it on add, and with the second value you can apply a better rotation. Yeah, like it is like very parallel to the actual bottle, so it's a better foundation to the projection that we want to do later. So, and in the beginning of the nodes you can add a transform node, and with that you can transform the actual curve, so also the distance between the flowers and the bottle. Alright, so in the end we need to realize instances, otherwise we cannot do the shrink wrap modifiers and solidify modifiers. And speaking of it, that is exactly what we want to do right now. So just go into the modifiers tab and add a shrink wrap modifier at first. And as a target, choose the bottle. And you see now the flowers are like looking very, very nicely placed onto that and following the shape of it. And you can do a little bit of an offset to not make it directly overlapping. And I noticed that my flowers are not in the right direction. They are pointing downwards and not upwards. And so I took the original mesh of my big flower and I just rotated it so it started to face upwards into the right direction. And the next thing is that I need a solidify modifier. So just below the shrink wrap modifier, add a solidify modifier. It cannot be the other way around. It has to be down there. Otherwise you won't have that nice design. And here we go. This is very, very close to the original, and I believe that's one of the best ways you can achieve it. After the solidify modifier, it's a good way to add a subdivision surface again, just to give it a bit more roundness and softness. You can play around with the subdivision surfaces because one is applied without all the geometry nodes and modifiers, and one is applied after them. And to make sure it is not too crazy in the end, you just have to play around with it. So I ended up using level 2 in my original mesh, and in the end result I chose 2 as well. So I believe that is looking, yeah, the closest to the original. One thing I noticed playing around with the shrink wrap modifier is that the wrap method project gives a better result. So I would recommend you to change that to project. Alright, what is the next step? I believe that we are done so far with the first circular array of flowers for our bottle. We will now want to introduce the next circular arrays. And we don't have to leave our geometry node setup or network right now. We can do this in the same network. And the first step for that would be that we have to introduce a curve circle and a transform node. And after you have connected those two with each other, also add a join geometry node at the end of our network so we can make this new mesh visible. I would recommend you to deactivate the shrink wrap and the solidify modifier to better see what is actually going on. And then we continue with the new node, which is curve to points. And we're adding an instance on points as well as we did earlier. Actually, it's the same process. And as well as, and this time we need the medium-sized flower that we just drag and drop into our node network. And then we connect the geometry to instance. And in order to make something visible at all, we should crank up the scaling in the transform node a little bit, so the flowers come to life. Yeah, the size of the flowers you can control in the instance on points node. And we need to connect the rotation with the rotation again. And we also need a vector math node again. It is actually almost the same because it's the same technique. So yeah, just apply these techniques again. Make sure that the angle is right, so it is not too steep. So it's kind of parallel to the bottle. And then you can scale it down a bit in the transform node to get it closer to the actual glass. And if you looked at the reference photo carefully, you will see that the flowers in this array have to point upwards. and you can fix that in our vector math node with the first value. And now it's time to apply the shrink wrap modifier and the solidify modifier, and you will see, yeah, we are getting somewhere. It's a little bit of overlapping there, so we have to scale the actual flowers a little bit down so the overlapping disappears. And you know, we can do this in instance on points. This is where we control the size of our flowers. And if you have settled that and the sizes are okay, then it is time for our third circular array with the very small flowers at the bottom. And for that, we simply take the whole string that we already created and we duplicate it with Shift D. And you have to connect the instance on points with join geometry. We have to exchange the medium-sized flower with the small flower as the target, and then we will go into the transform mode and transform node and reduce the Z value a little bit to take it down. And it's always a good idea to deactivate shrink wrap and solidify to better see what's going on. The scaling helps for making the curve bigger, so it is not inside the bottle but outside of it. And our vector math helps to get the right rotation. And yeah, if it looks like something like this or similar to that, you can activate the modifiers again, and then you can do the fine-tuning. Great, this is okay for the bottom for now. Now we come into the next stage where we want to create the cap. And for that, we simply duplicate the mesh on which our geometry node setup is based on, and we will pull it up to the cap. And yeah, don't be confused about this mess that is now created. We will fix that in a second. So start by deleting the last two networks that we created and stay with the first one, the original one, and you have to change in the object info the flower type to the medium-sized one, because I think that's closest to what we have there. And actually it's the same process. You can scale the radius of the circle in order to make it closer to the cap. You can scale the size of the flowers. And it's a very repetitive process, and that makes it also so simple. And if you're done testing it, you can activate your modifiers again. If you have strange overlapping like this, what I have right now, you probably have to change the target. Yes, we haven't done that yet. So now it is properly applied. And I will fast forward now because I think you got the point. And if you don't understand some things, then simply go back to the first approaches and redo it. And I think you will learn this very quickly. Very well, so now it's time for the flower that is on the top of our cap. We don't have to apply a geometry node network for that, of course not, because it's a single mesh object. So we simply copy our medium-sized flower over to the top and we rotate it by 90 degrees and position it in a good way. And then the only thing we need is a shrink wrap and solidify modifiers, and that should definitely do it. There's still one detail that we haven't thought about yet, and that is these little bubbles on the flowers. And we will have to duplicate the mesh with the geometry network and apply it again, but this time without the shrink wrap modifiers and solidify modifiers, because that would end in a mess. That would definitely not look good. So you take the geometry node network, or the mesh that it is based on, and you duplicate it one time. You deactivate the modifiers, and then you add in a UV sphere as a geometry node. With that UV sphere, you can replace the object infos that we have already in there. And actually you can delete the shrink wrap and the solidify, because we don't need that, and also the subdivision. So now simply take the mesh input and put it into the instances, and you will see that the bubbles come to life. Scale them down a little bit in the radius. And with a transform node that you can place between it, you will be able to make them smaller so they look like these little droplets or like these little, what is it? I don't know, bubble gums? You know what I mean. Yes, this is the result that we want to have. So you scale them down in X. I have chosen a value of 0.4 and that already looks, quite convincing. And if you now play around with the vector math rotation and the scaling of the circle, you might be able, or you will be able to position them in the exact right spots. So there is still one droplet missing, and that is the one on the very top of the cap, and I will place that manually with Shift A, add in a UV sphere, and then position and scale it until it looks like the other ones, and also apply a subdivision surface modifier in order to make it more smooth. And I forgot the petals that are directly below the ring. If you look at the neck, you will see these little pack-ups peeking through, and for that I simply take one of the blossoms, I duplicate them, and I only want to keep one of these petals, and that one you can then take into our geometry network and place it up below the ring. It's really the same process. Just create another circular array in the geometry node network and then put this thing into it, and it works. So very well, if that is accomplished, I would say the design is completed. Everything that is important is in there right now. And what I have done in the video and what you can see right now is more like a bonus. I thought about creating the inner parts of this perfume bottle. And so I created a hole at the bottom of the cap. Simply, selected a little bit of it and pulled it upwards, so there's place for this, these inner pieces. I don't know the names. I really have no idea how this is called in English, but I guess you know what I mean. The thing that you push and the stuff is coming out of it, All right. So there has to be a hole for that, and this is what I create right now. So it's quite simple. And then I changed the glass as well, because I thought that would not be very realistic as it is right now. I don't think that any glass is produced like that. And so I took away this neck that I created earlier, and I took it down, and just like that, just a few improvements here and there. So this might also be interesting for you. This is the sprayer, the sprayer button where the stuff comes out. And it's actually a simple cylinder. That's really not a big deal. But how can you create this little hole where the stuff comes out? And this is simply achieved with the loop tools again. So you would select 9 faces, then you would do an inset on it. And if you then hit the circle function again, you can have a perfect circle out of that. And if you then inset it again and do an extrude into the inside of it, then you have this little spray design, whatever it is. Maybe you didn't know. I believe that the loop tools are really, really helpful and handy for those kind of tasks. And the last interesting thing would be the tube, which transports the liquid to the sprayer. And for that I will use a Bezier curve. So simply add in a curve Bezier and place it into the right position. This is achieved by going into the edit mode with tab, and then you take the vertices and place them where you need them to be. And then you go into the properties of the Bezier and you do a bevel or a depth. And so you can add a little bit of thickness to it. And you see it looks like a tube. And if you are done with that, I would recommend to convert it into a mesh and add also a little bit of a solidify modifier, because that makes it more realistic. And if you then have a material that is kind of transmissive or transparent, then it should look, yeah, very realistic in the end. So great, that is accomplished. I would say all of the modeling is done. Just for purposes of presentation, I would like to add some materials right now. So I add in a glass shader. This is very simple stuff. I don't go deep into that. Simply take out the roughness and I have to quickly set up an environment so you can see what's going on. And very good. So the inner part will also be a glass BDSF, but at this time you take an IOR of 1.333 to make it like water. And you have to apply the smooth shading, because otherwise it would look a little bit strange as it looks right now. So yeah, apply that and it should look okay. Yeah. Then I also add something for the flowers. It's actually a white material. It's a little bit glossy, but not too much. So take down roughness and maybe, yeah, take down the color just a slightly bit, but that's all right. The cap, or the UV sphere cap, will be a metallic material. So you will take down roughness a bit and you crank up metallic and it should look okay already. Shading smooth, and the same things with the little droplets, and they get a metallic material, but at this time they will look golden. So take a yellowish or orangey color and yeah, apply it. Of course, we are in geometry nodes, so we have to apply the material in the geometry nodes. Let me do this quickly. You simply go directly to the UV sphere and then you search for the node set material, place it in between it, and then you choose the right material that you just set up, like the golden material, and that is it. And you have to do the same thing for the flowers as well, because they are all geometry node generated. So the flowers have to be apply the set material to as well, but you can do this at the very end of the node setup. So what I want to do right now is I want to do some lighting. I love lighting and I use my advanced light maps for that. I choose at first the elegant gradient, which gives a very nice and natural gradient. These maps are very high quality maps that we created in a photo studio in Berlin. And they serve me well for all kinds of product visualization and rendering. And they are for sale, by the way, if you want to support yourself in the first instance. If you want to get better renderings and improve the quality of your renders, then you can get yourself these light maps. And of course, you will also support me as an artist by purchasing it. Thank you in advance for that. Yay, you made it through it. Thank you for watching the whole video and thank you for working together with me on this model. I hope you enjoyed the process and you learned something. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and leave me a comment. Would be very much appreciated. Thank you so much and we see each other next time. Bye bye.